Let me check. There's always a lag of like a few seconds. Okay, I think we're live. Please, everybody in the chat, let us know if the sound is all right. That's always the number one most important thing. And I hope my internet connection remains stable because I'm right now here somewhere in the jungle of Tulum, and you never know what happens. But anyways, there's over 100 people already watching live. This is crazy. The secret agents are on fire. The shade community is on fire, and with right, because I have a very special guest today, Carter, who is an author as well. So we can talk a little bit about your book that you wrote about blockchain in general. And I think that kind of like led you towards a role at Secret Network. So we're going to be talking a lot about secret, meta, privacy, what that means, and then stablecoins, because with your latest project, Shade Protocol, you work a lot on a very new, innovative approach to build a stable asset there. So we talk about this, and of course the airdrop in the very end. Everybody's always excited about this. But yeah, first things first, Carter, thanks for joining. What's up? How are you doing? How's everything?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It means a lot to be able to speak to the broader Cosmos community. I mean, it's such a strong growing ecosystem across all these different blockchains, and the community definitely pushed to make this happen. Huge fan of the show. Absolute honor to be here. I'm doing great. I'm based out of Minnesota, so it's like I can see snow outside and it's very, very cold. So
yeah, but that also sometimes has a good vibe. Like when I go back to Germany, which is where I'm originally from, and in the forest, and it's raining, and in winter obviously it's snowing. I think right now there's snow. It has a different vibe. Like I think 365 days the same weather is also not the best thing. Marcus is saying there's -20 with wind chill here in New Hampshire. Okay, I wouldn't want to change for that, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the community, like I said, is always the most important thing. And you can also already tell when I had Tor on, and he also came to the Cosmoverse conference. You unfortunately couldn't make it, hopefully for the next one. But the secret community is huge, and you guys have done something very innovative that I still think a lot of people haven't really understood yet. Personally, I have also not done such deep research because there's only so many things that you can do in crypto, right? I'm sure you know that. And I've gone more towards the Cosmos, Atom, IBC route, and Osmosis, really gone deep into that. But always happy to learn from people that are very, very deep in different fields. And it says on your cap already, privacy is a very, very important field in crypto. So yeah, maybe we can start off that you share your crypto journey. And we already teased a little bit your book. Was that how you kind of like first started to publicly learn with the book? Because obviously you have to research a lot to write it, or have you been in crypto already a long time before that? Maybe you can share a little bit about your journey and then how you ended up in the Cosmos ecosystem.
100%. Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. So for the journey for me, it started back in late 2017. I had a relative link me some resources on blockchain and started falling down the rabbit hole. Ended up with like 50, 60 pages of notes, and I realized, wait a second, I think I'm writing a book. I think I'm writing a book right now. So I kept going down that route, kept digging in deeper and deeper. Like most of the literature out there was either way too investment focused and I didn't know how to explain the technology, or it was way too far down the tech stack and it had no investing fundamentals. So I really tried to write something that was a confluence of those two ideas. And it was within those 3 years of research that it became glaringly obvious that like blockchains to date are completely publicly transparent. And that simple fact, that simple design constraint that everyone seemingly just accepted is a massive problem for institutional investors in the long run, institutional adoption, as well as retail adoption. So these were trade-offs that within those 3 years of research, it was like nobody was talking about it. And so that's where I found Enigma, which was originally a layer 2 privacy solution on Ethereum, which eventually became Secret Network, which is a layer 1 Cosmos chain that I've had the honor to be part of that community for the last year or two. And more specifically within that journey of joining this privacy community, beginning to like foster a community and help other people build products. That's when the stablecoin narrative started to emerge. during this time. And what I always like to say is, like, if you go to a vendor with something like Tether or DAI or UST and you try to make a one-to-one transaction, if I try to go and buy an ice cream cone, that vendor knows your entire balance and every transaction you've made since the beginning of time. You're permanently doxxed. And because blockchain is immutable, privacy is even more important in Web 3 than Web 2. And that's where the dream to build a privacy preserving stablecoin that also had a path to auditability and compliance was born. And that's kind of the story of Shade Protocol and Silk. And that's what I've been working on for the last year with an awesome group of developers. We've been on stealth mode for a while, and then in September we announced what we were going after, and we're kind of off to the races right now. So
yeah, and you have done achieved already great things. I mean, the community is absolutely crazy about it, as we can tell, and I think this concept of meta privacy, which we're gonna go much deeper in a second, is very unique and not too much addressed. Actually, I think there's very few projects out there that really try to tackle the privacy issue. And like you say, even if we look at NFTs, I remember back when I had Tor on, he teased a little bit about NFTs, and I'm gonna get him back on the show for Stash, I think it's called, which is an NFT marketplace or something, to learn about this. Because even with NFTs, right? I mean, if you hold an NFT that you share publicly because you're proud to own it or whatever, and it's linked to your coin account, right, where everybody can see, oh, you have these coins, and you know because you're doxed through the NFT. I think if you can also separate the two somehow, and have this like private ownership, that you can still see that, okay, I can prove that I own this asset, but still you can't see my entire balances. I think that's what a lot of people should also want in the future. But yeah, maybe you can explain a little bit more on the innovation of Secret. You've been around and part of the community for a long time. Actually, I think part of the core contributor team or whatever. And also this term meta privacy, what that means. Maybe you can explain that a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, so the dream of Secret Network is really simple. Prior to Secret Network, all of the different privacy preserving chains, they had one goal, like privacy for transactions when we're going from A to B, right? But blockchain is so much more than sending an asset from A to B and obscuring that, right? Like when it comes to the privacy side of things, because way back we had something called smart contracts get invented, which unlocked a whole set of use cases because we can store state on the blockchain, and we can change the state, and we can have these amazing applications in DeFi, gaming, NFTs, whatever have you. And so the realization was we need a way for that data to be stored privately. We need on-chain encryption for smart contract metadata itself. The example we like to use very often is if you tried to make a decentralized Uber application on the blockchain, all that metadata would be completely publicly visible all the time on something like Ethereum. So that means your location would be always visible and like stored on chain. And like that's not sustainable. And you can let your imagination run wild on all the other applications that we want to make in Web3, where if we don't have privacy, it's simply not plausible for like a whole range of security reasons. So the way I view it is that privacy is the key to unlocking the full value of a decentralized future. And Secret Network was the first layer one to have privacy for smart contracts. It's this massive sandbox for developers where we have granular control over what is and isn't visible with these contracts. And that's really what I think meta privacy is you have, privacy for everything, not just transactions, but also the application data itself.
So for those people that are maybe, in crypto for a few years, but throughout the 2018, 2019 bear market, they're kind of like got lost a little bit of interest. So they kind of like have this, when they hear privacy, they affiliate it directly with Monero, which is probably one of the biggest and most widely known privacy projects out there. So can you maybe differentiate and compare the two, Monero and Secret Network, what their missions are? Because I think they're quite different, right?
Yeah, so Monero is interesting because I kind of think of it as like a spectrum of privacy, right? You got Ethereum on the left, completely transparent. You have Monero, which is a black box. Its goal is to never be auditable. It to be everything is completely obfuscated, right? And Secret Network, I think its goal is to straddle the middle ground where there's sovereignty for users and choice over what data isn't and isn't revealed. So every user has something called a viewing key. And what viewing keys allow you to do is you're able to decrypt your own transactions and data that you own, like on the chain, and your own transactions. So like the last tax season, I was able to take on-chain encrypted data and hand it off to like a tax account and be totally compliant, totally good to go. That's insanely powerful, and we need that. I can share that viewing key with anyone I want. I can share components of that viewing key so someone can only see certain transactions or certain pieces of the application data that's stored there. So in summary, difference between Secret Network and Monero, I think Secret Network specifically has the goal to give you that sovereignty with what's decrypted. On the actual tech stack level, we're talking about hardware level encryption versus alternatives, which is its own rabbit hole you can definitely fall down. But they're both phenomenal pieces of technology. I love Monero. I love the ethos behind it. I'm just a firm believer that in the world of privacy, we need granularity and sovereignty for both builders and users, right? Because that's generally where the beautiful applications are built.
So is it also possible that through secret contracts or secret, like private smart contracts on the Secret Network, you could probably add a privacy layer to Ethereum or to all these other layer ones out there or dApps that are currently running on other chains that are transparent? Is that possible that you could potentially like kind of like encrypt this data as well from other chains? Or
yeah, so IBC has the best chance for this to work. So when people say cross-chain smart contract calls, you'll hear this buzzword thrown around and no one can ever like quite explain what it means. And so simply put, what cross-chain contract calls enable is you have chain A and chain B, and a transaction, a movement of an asset on chain A triggers a movement of an asset on chain B. So you could technically have applications in other Cosmos chains that trigger a movement of an asset on Secret Network or a movement of data on Secret Network. So that's super interesting, and that unlocks a lot of potential. Like you could have like your password and account management on Secret Network, and then you have your application on a totally transparent blockchain, right? And you could have some sort of like interoperability between the two. It's difficult though because the actual underlying validator and hardware is what gives you the privacy. So when you leave this network, you don't get to just like magically keep the privacy. Like the underlying servers and hardware is what creates the secret sauce, as some people like to jokingly say. There is ways to you can use Secret Network as like a mixer. So I know there's like a Ethereum project with Secret Network being built. I don't even know if it's fully public right now, but it's essentially going to be like a mixer for like Ethereum transactions using Secret Network. But yeah, I think IBC is our best bet for these other Cosmos chains being able to use and inherit some of the privacy properties of Secret Network. So
yeah, I think it would be interesting also if you could, for example, bring a secret version of Bitcoin or wrap it somehow, I don't know, onto the Cosmos ecosystem, and play around with it there, right? And have all the benefits of the Cosmos technology stacks that are out there that are, I think, currently being discovered by many, many people in the crypto space. I don't know what's happening, but in the past few weeks, I think the surge of interest in Cosmos is crazy. I mean, you've also seen it, right? There's like, and right now there's 120 people watching. So this also shows like we are, I think, on the right train here. So Cosmos is definitely here to stay. And what I also love about what you guys do and what you do with Shade and what Tor and you guys also at the Secret Foundation do with Secret is kind of like this ethos to out collaborate the competition, and the competition in that case being traditional finance, right? Not other crypto projects per se, rather to say, hey, there's still, we're still so early in this, and we're still experimenting with all that. So yeah, everybody who's watching now, please drop questions if you have any. Later we'll make a little AMA, pick some of the questions. There are also a lot of questions on Twitter. But yeah, another thing. So what I want to really go down to, and I think that's also something that the community can take a lot of value from, is that we can talk a little bit about stablecoins. There has been a whole evolution of stablecoins, right? We basically started with the Tether, which is an asset-backed stablecoin. I think there's like two categories, right? You have asset-backed stablecoins, and then you have algorithmic stablecoins, which is something like DAI. I think DAI pioneered this in the first place, but there have always been some issues with maintaining the peg, especially in volatile days. And then UST came around, which is one of the first, actually, I think the first Cosmos stablecoin that also just implemented IBC. And now you guys are on the block with Shade and or Silk, basically, which is backed by a basket of coins. So can you maybe walk us through this whole evolution and say share some of your thoughts on each of them? What do you see them, how sustainable they are, and all these kind of things?
Yeah, the stablecoin story, I love this story. So when things started out in crypto, there wasn't many cryptocurrencies around. We had crazy volatility with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and so we needed a stable store of value that was actually stable, right? And this is where Tether came onto the scene, and it solved the problem of liquidity, right? It's like this on-chain cryptocurrency. There's a bunch of it out there, but there's a couple of big problems with Tether out of the gates. First off, extremely centralized. There's been examples of like transactions being frozen on chain. Secondly, Tether is the promise that there's some real world bank out there that for every Tether in existence, there's $1 just sitting there in terms of the redemption process. We have no way of knowing this is true. It could be a massive black swan. So purely from the centralization standpoint, and purely from like we don't have like a mathematical guarantee that it's actually backed. There's like a lot of risk in Tether. And so this is where MakerDAO kind of emerged on the scene. And they came up with this brilliant concept. If you put up like $150 worth of collateral, we can mint out something that we can say, because it's backed by collateral, we have a lot of confidence that this will sit at a certain value. And whenever it's kind of based off of a system of lending and liquidation and pulling the stable coin out of circulation whenever the underlying collateral backing it drops, right? The problem with DAI is that the token expansion is based off of leveraged positions, right? Like at the end of the day, it's people locking up collateral and minting something out. And so what we found during bear markets is that the system's not reflexive enough. And even more recently, more and more of the collateral that is backing DAI is, ironically, you guessed it, Tether, right? The very thing we're supposed to be getting away from. And I think this is where Terra Luna emerged as this just like beautiful third generation stablecoin, like a totally different model that had never been done. What Terra Luna did to kind of solve for this over collateralized system that's not reflexive enough is they have an algorithmic peg. And the way it works is you pick a target price, let's say $1, and whenever UST is trading above $1, there is an opportunity to convert Luna into UST, which expands the supply of UST, and people are able to lock in the arbitrage profits. So whenever there's a supply and demand misbalance and the demand for UST pushes the price above $1, someone's going to expand the supply for the whole system and reap the profits of doing so, right? And in the contractionary event, it's the same kind of beautiful system where if UST is under peg, there's an opportunity for you to burn your UST or seigniorage it and mint out Luna and gain arbitrage profits. So it's this arbitrage system that keeps pushing it back to the target peg. And so the system isn't backed by collateral. It's backed by a massive arbitrage community that are openly interacting with these conversion minting contracts. So UST today has done phenomenal. There's like over 10 billion in circulation. And I think we're only going to continue to see the massive success of UST. But this is where Shade Protocol and Silk came along as kind of like a fourth generation concept. And there's a couple things that we wanted to innovate on Terra Luna system. So the first thing is that like with a lot of blockchains in Cosmos, there's these community pools, right? And they're collateral that's just kind of sitting there. People can go to them and ask for funding, and then they can go and build stuff, which is great. But the Cosmos SDK was never designed for a DAO to play like a super like active role in the ecosystem outside of like a community pool. And so Shade Protocol, which is an array of connected privacy preserving applications, the first of which is Silk stablecoin, is built on Secret Network. And so because we're built on Secret Network, we inherit the security layer, which means that staking collateral for Shade, as well as the treasury, both contribute to arbing the open market. So Shade is to Luna as Silk is to UST. But we added in 2 additional stability mechanisms. So Terra UST, it's got the institutional arbitrage players and the retail arbitrage players. Shade Protocol with Silk has retail, institutional, treasury, and staking collateral backing. So there's like 4 different entities at play that are all helping maintain Silk's peg. So that's differentiator number 1. Differentiator number 2, Silk has privacy, programmable privacy, actually. So that means you can transact Silk privately on Secret Network, which is a beautiful feature. And with the viewing keys I talked about earlier, it also means that Silk is auditable and compliant, which is like super, super key. And the third component that's differentiated, and this is probably the most exciting part in my opinion, is Silk is pegged to a basket of global currencies and commodities. So the Shade Protocol team, when we looked at the state of DeFi, we said, it seems interesting that the US dollar is the flagship of DeFi. These US dollar stablecoins are the flagship of DeFi. That seems like a lot of risk from 2 perspectives. One, from the legal standpoint. Like we have these derivative dollar stable coins. Like a lot of these governments are kind of looking at these stable coins and being like, what the heck do we do with these things? We don't actually fully know what the answer to that is. Secondly, what happens as we're seeing right now in the macroeconomy when the dollar potentially heads towards more and more inflation? It means all these people holding these dollar stable coins are inheriting the fact that what they're holding, the stable store of value, is losing its purchasing power over time. And so we said, we have an opportunity to innovate and create a stable coin that retains purchasing power better than any currency that has ever been invented, which is an insanely bold claim, but that is what we set out to do. And so Silk, the target peg price, consists of a bunch of different weights of all the different global currencies. And based off of their GDP contribution, that's how large the weight is. And we also include gold and other commodities into the peg. And so the end result is Silk is able to retain purchasing power better than like we've back tested it 25 years. And if this works, this completely changes the stablecoin ballgame, right? Like mom and pops have the opportunity to park their value in a stablecoin without having to right now, like mom and dad would have to go to the Forex markets and hedge against the dollar's volatility, right? To be able to preserve their purchasing power. They have to play around with commodities. But with Silk, assuming this model works, you could just hold Silk. And it's like an ETF of currency commodities. So that's the vision of Silk. We looked at Terra Luna. We added in more stability, privacy, and added in this basket system. And we believe the end result is something that can truly change Web3 in the entire world. So
that was a lot. Marty's already saying, gotta rewatch this. Lots of gems drop. I think me myself, I have to watch this a couple of times to fully follow everything that you said. But there was so many cool things there, and thanks also for showcasing this whole evolution from Tether to UST, and now next step in the evolution, the fourth generation with Silk. I remember last week when we had our little intro call, we also talked briefly about Olympus DAO, which is also a project that has a similar vision. I think they don't want to be pegged to the dollar, but they want to be backed by a basket of assets that ensures purchasing power, right, and goes up in value. So what are some? Did you look at this? Did you take over some of their kind of features in game theory? And is anything of that also embedded in Silk?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. So the beauty of Shade Protocol is it's an array of connected privacy preserving applications. So Silk is just the first first application in this entire system. So there's other key primitives we want to bring to the table. And one of them, which has emerged in Web3 that everyone has to have, is like a very effective DAO, specifically protocol-owned liquidity. So Olympus DAO showed that bonds allow this like decentralized treasury to acquire uncorrelated assets from the secondary market in return for selling like its governance token, its utility and treasury token. So the Shade DAO will also be having bonds. So it's a similar thing where the goal of the treasury is to acquire as many uncorrelated assets as possible. And the reason this is such a beautiful concept for us is that, remember, the treasury collateral is also helping arb the open market, which means Silk is being protected by a treasury of uncorrelated assets. Like that's a level of stability that as the DAO grows, so does the stability of the Silk peg. Additionally, with the Shade DAO and the bond mechanism, as we're pulling in layer 1 tokens like Secret and Luna and Atom, the treasury is going to stake those assets. So you know how a DAO that's securing multiple layer 1s, generating APR from securing them, guess where that revenue stream is going? That's going to be going to Shade stakers, right? And one of like the long-term philosophy of Shade protocol is we saw everyone in other ecosystems, they keep launching new application tokens over and over and over again. And this does two things. First off, it dilutes value capture. Like imagine if for Luna, every single Luna application that was made, sole job was to like 100% capture all of the value and give it back to Luna, right? Think about how powerful that effect would be. So it dilutes value capture when you do a new application token for every primitive. It also makes kind of a confusing end user experience, right? If I go from like an anchor to a white whale to a mirror, it's like, what's this mirror token? What's this anchor token? Da, 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 da. What if you had this cohesive set of primitives that only had one governance and treasury token, and all the value capture from these different revenue streams all fed directly back to the same treasury, DAO, and stakers? And so that is the other huge, I know you brought up Olympus DAO, and I kind of ran with it and talked about some of the mechanics, but like if you look at the white paper, that is one of our like guiding principles is no unique application tokens per primitive. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I think like this whole concept has done a lot of ways in the crypto space recently. So I think it's important to always look at these things, right? There was a lot of things that were pretty innovative. Also, I think Wonderland, I don't know how much innovation they actually added to Olympus DAO, but at least they brought it to a faster chain. And I think the founder of Wonderland is also pretty bullish on Cosmos, so maybe we can also bring him on to our side. But so you already teased a little bit about the Shade tokenomics, and they're absolutely insane. I watched one of your videos where you talk about the 4 basically value accrual mechanisms, and like you just pointed out, just to have one token and not 4 or 5 different tokens to have these specific roles in their own protocol, but to have one that is kind of like for multiple protocols. But we can talk about this in a second. And also you have to drop some alpha on tokenomics and all these kind of things. And the airdrop, everyone is very excited about it. But before we do that, there was one conversation you had with Sunny, or the Shade protocol account. I think you were in that conversation as well.
The synthetics. Yeah.
Yeah, about the synthetics assets, kind of like backed by a coin. And Sunny proposed this to do it with Ion, right? Which is this crazy experiment on Osmosis. Ion, for those who don't know, is the second token that was sneaked in last minute onto the Genesis file on Osmosis, and had a very low supply, so it had a pretty high price, right? Similar to what YFI did a year and a half ago. And then it just came out there, and people got Ions for free for participating in governance. So suddenly they had all this money, all these holders, and now I think Ion is potentially almost ready to be on its own feet, and this kind of like synthetic asset could be a great use case for it. But then you guys jumped in and you said, hey guys, we're already working on this for a long time. So can you maybe share your thoughts on this, and how this Ion proposal compares to Silk?
Yeah, so one of the primitives that we're launching immediately after Silk is synthetic assets. So the realization our team had had way back, because obviously it's in white paper form, but it went further back than white paper. What we realized is that all of the existing synthetic markets use the model similar to MakerDAO, right? Like I put up $150 worth of collateral, I mint out $100 worth of a synthetic, right? And we talked about the trade-offs of that system. That's why Terra Luna was created. And so the realization we had is, what if you applied the Terra Luna algorithmic peg, but instead of targeting something like $1 or a super stable price, what if we're tracking a volatile price? What if we're tracking a moving peg? This would mean that you can have a synthetic asset, let's say gold, call it synthetic gold, and something called stabilizer gold. And the arbitrage between the stabilizer and the synthetic token ultimately would be able to keep it at the real world target price based off of an Oracle data feed, right? No one's done the model before, but if it works, it completely changes the whole synthetics market, because right now with these over collateralized model, it's like, why lock up $150 worth of collateral, mint out $100 worth of a synthetic, and liquidity provide it, if you could instead just buy the synthetic and liquidity provide it? And it's the fundamental difference in risk profiles between those two decisions that are creating pricing premiums on secondary markets for synthetic assets, right? And so if we instead use a system, as I proposed in the white paper, where we use the Terra Luna model, if this system works, that risk premium disappears, because token expansion of the synthetic is based off of the demand for it, just like in the Terra UST system. So I obviously like this model. Like a long time ago, I was like, got super excited about this, had it all outlined. We add privacy onto this whole system. We have like this whole entry minting system as well. Now, here's the danger of Sunny's system, in my opinion. We actually had a little tweet thread back and forth about this. I think one of our devs was talking about this. So we made a very distinct decision with synthetics, which we already have a whip up on our GitHub. So like, because it's the same model, it's going to be super easy to launch. It's very experimental, but it's not like, oh, we have to sit down and code for like 5 months. It's like, it's the same type of like algorithmic model, right? It's just for synthetics. But with the Ion proposal, the idea is that Ion would be backing every single synthetic asset. So you would be arbing between Ion and, let's say, gold, wheat, silver, whatever have you. And the problem I realized way back is what happens when one of those synthetic assets goes off of peg. The market capitalization of the stabilizer token would then have to get drained to push back the synthetic to peg. But if there's a complete collapse and a complete panic, you could drain all of the market capitalization from, in this case, Ion's market capitalization, in order to save one synthetic that like all the arbitrage community like abandoned in some sort of panic event. So that is why we distinctly said in our white paper, every single synthetic asset has its own unique stabilizer token. And in this way, we are siloing out the risk of every given synthetic asset. And in this way, we're able to preserve the whole system. So if one synthetic fails and 30 succeeds, it doesn't mean the model doesn't work. It means there wasn't enough demand for the synthetic and there wasn't enough arbitrage support to keep the synthetic asset at the target peg. And so once again, the risk of the Ion system, what my worry is, and we'll see if they go for it, is that is a lot of risk. I think that has to be thought about long and hard, because I can tell you, it kept me up at 4 a.m. in the night thinking about the model and the risk. You have to think about the risk of the system and where it lives. So that's my summary of it.
But yeah, it sounds like basically diluting and minimizing the risk here is super important. To say, like, if you say, like you said, if one asset goes down and there's a bank run or whatever, then you would not entirely lose the backing of the coin, right, of the system. So I think that's something to consider. Maybe you and Sunny, and also the Nova DAO guys, they're also building kind of like more in the direction of Olympus DAO on the Cosmos ecosystem. Maybe you all guys should jump on a
yeah.
And
there's also one other component that worries me, and I hate to be guys worrying, because when I say worry, this is because I care about end users, because I care about creating systems that are extremely stable and conservative and reduce risk, or at least allocate risk to the right spot in a system, right? The beauty of like Terra Luna's system is that like the floor of value in their model is attached to like transactions, right? Like there's transaction value accrual. Silk has a similar mechanisms with like transactions, like accruing value from them. Ion doesn't like inherit like transactions, like transaction value, right? Like it's like, what is the floor value of Ion? That would be my question. And if they can answer that, then I'm like, great, like that's awesome. But if you can't come up with like a fundamental utility that we know is like a floor of value, then like there is no hypothetical floor backing the entire system. Terra has it, Silk has it, and I think if there can be some sort of revenue stream that we consider the floor value for Ion, then it's like, great, we can run with it. But if there's no floor value and it's just like collective market capitalization of people buying it, then it's like, I don't trust that enough. So, and once again, I'm sure some very smart people will watch this episode and be like, Card is wrong about this, this, and this. But I just want to put it out there. I'm not trying to go after anyone. I'm just trying to protect end users and have the safest possible systems. I'm always happy to have a dialogue. That's just my perspective on the potential proposal. So
no, I appreciate that, and I think that's potentially also what the proposal that Sunny put up, and also the proposal 130, I think is all about, to kind of like slowly get Ion on its own feet, right? Maybe have it on its own chain and have its own governance and its own DAO and everything, because like I said, that would capture this intrinsic floor value, whatever, for Ion. So I think, from my feeling, and I have not, deeply caught up with everything, this is where it could be headed, and then it would be more like what you said, a more stable, more robust asset on itself. And I think also, like you said, there's I think it came out from the thread as well, that there's a lot of room for projects to coexist and find their own kind of like traction and their own niches, right? I think there's so much room in the crypto world. Instead of having to like pick a winner or say who is, better or worse than the other or whatever. But yeah, I appreciate that, and your thoughts about this. It's really interesting and exciting.
I do think Ion is brilliant. By the way, like the fact that like that was able to launch, and we've reached the point where like there's like so much like market capitalization capture on it that like we could do something interesting with Ion on Osmosis. Like that's like crazy cool. So I hope we can find like a really cool use case for it. If it's just gonna be a meme coin into perpetuity, I mean that's cool with me too.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, when I noticed like the traction around it, and the conference came closer, and I talked to all the people from Osmosis, I'm like, hey, this is actually a cool thing, and the community is actually really active. So when it was on this large dip, I bought a bunch of Ion, and now it's gone up like crazy, to like, I don't know, it's even above 15K right now, which is completely nuts. And it is giant clawback, because most people didn't even like claim their airdrop, or like you had to make a transaction to get the airdrop. And I think from the 21,500 Ions, I think 16,500 were clawed back to the community treasury. So there's only 5,000 in circulation or something, which is crazy. I think hence the crazy price increase. And also people learning about Osmosis now, they're also like hearing that, oh, this Ion coin is affiliated to Osmosis, so I just go ahead and buy this without even knowing what it is or does, which I think most people in crypto do anyways. They just blindly buy, But yeah, so on this channel, we're not doing that, and at least not primarily. I think sometimes we all do this, the latest, hottest meme coin or whatever. But if you do it with a very, very small percentage of your capital, that wouldn't get you wrecked entirely if you lose everything. I think that's also part of the crypto revolution at some point. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the Shade tokenomics. You guys also are going to do an airdrop, and a lot of people, which I find so funny, are like, oh my god, I only get 0.6 or whatever Shade coins, and oh my god, haha, that's nothing. And it doesn't even have a dollar value. It hasn't even launched. So what can you tell about the tokenomics? Is it capped? Is there a limited supply? Is it going to be on its own chain, also from an architectural standpoint, that it will accrue also transactional value? Maybe you can share a little bit about the utility and some facts around the supply and everything.
100%. So first off, I'll talk about Shade. So there's 10 million Shade at launch. Approximately 14.5% is being airdropped to multiple chains, Seeger Network, Luna, and Atom. There was a super long staking period between November 7th and December 13th for people to qualify for the Shade airdrop. Really important to note that Silk, the stablecoin we were talking about earlier, the more Silk that is demanded and the more that supply grows, the more shade that is burned to support that. So just like with the UST and Luna, more UST means more Luna burn, right? So in that sense, all goes well. Shade is a deflationary token in its own right. Obviously, like it'll have its fluctuations. So it's targeting a low supply airdrop. Or not a low supply airdrop, just low supply token in general. So there's a lot of people that looked at the claim and they're like, oh, like this isn't much. Like, why isn't this like 10,000 or 100,000? And it's kind of like the weird part about crypto is like all that really matters is your percentage of protocol ownership. So if you have 1 million of 10 trillion, you know, whatever, like that's no different than owning like 1 of 10 million. I know I did that conversion wrong, but you get the point. So it's definitely an intentional branding because we want Shade to be a premium asset over the long haul. Like that's kind of how we want it branded. That's where we are hoping that the price will end up landing and the market psychology behind that. And that's a distinct decision to have Shade framed that way versus a super, super big supply, right? So these are kind of like, I think we're making a short-term trade-off for a long-term advantage with for Shade. The rest of the tokenomics will be released at the date of the airdrop, so that there's no differentiation between the actual instantiation of the like contract itself that launches all of it versus the blog post. So we want to make sure that there's no room for any sort of variability. It's just like 100% locked in, no changes. So that'll be coming out. The airdrop itself, everyone's like, is he gonna give it? Is he gonna give it? The airdrop launch is contingent upon the developers taking their hands off the keyboards, looking us in the eyes and saying, we are good to go. We're not going to be a team that has business people that say, we're going to pick this date out in the future and hope the devs can execute by then. That's not how the Shade Protocol core team operates. We believe in making sure we build safe products, that we do it correctly, that we do it with the right reviews. The target, broadly speaking, is mid-January to the beginning of February. Every day that ticks by, we get closer and closer. So I'll talk about the two things that still need to be solved. The first thing that's being solved right now is, because it's a multi-chain airdrop, you essentially need a proof attached to a Kepler wallet that you say who you are. So we have that figured out for Atom and Secret. And the final component is this kind of permit proof is what we call it from the Terra side of things. So that's being solved as we speak. The second component is the final touches on the UI workflow as people come through and claim components of the airdrop. So those are really the two things outstanding. We've had like 1 million people look at the contract at this point in terms of like review from some reputable entities. So it's we're getting there, and I honestly think we'll hit that broad timeline, but we're not gonna give the specific date till the devs are comfortable, and you can know that the full tokenomics will 100% be released at airdrop. So
yeah, I think people really underestimate how much work there is also behind just building up the airdrop, game mechanics and theory and the claiming and all these kind of things. They just want to receive a coin that is super liquid and is worth a lot of money, and then they can sell it instantly. But for those that have done their research, that are saying like, hey, this Silk thing actually sounds pretty cool, what would be some of the use cases that you would be able to do once you receive the airdrop? Because obviously the idea is not to make users rich. I constantly say this, like, airdrops are not here to make us crazy rich. Sure, we're all happy if we get free money, and everything that has a dollar value that you can claim for free is a gift, right? And you should be thankful for it. But what would be some of the initial first things that I can do if I receive my Shade?
Sure. So we're actually breaking down the launch into two sections. So we have airdrop and making sure that there's liquidity for Shade, because economically it's super important that Shade has a market capitalization before Silk is out into the wild. So the Silk contract's like already done and ready to go. So it's going to be Shade airdrop and then a testnet period, final audit period for the whole thing. And then Silk will be going live. So this initial airdrop, your only kind of primary opportunity will be liquidity providing. So it's going to be, it is split up in that way, which for us, it's about like security of the system and making sure all the mainnet functionality is good to go. Final contracts on that side is like the treasury contract has some work that's getting done on it. The arbitrage contract that the staking collateral and the treasury collateral are deposited into that help arb and maintain Silk's price in addition to retail and institutional. That's getting touches being put on it as well. And then shade governance and the bond feature. Those are kind of like the other two things. So we got like 3 or 4 components left. And like once those are all fully locked in, audits complete, full mainnet launch with like with the bonds feature, with entry minting, with Silk being out in the wild. So that's where like most of the magic will be happening. Something I'll also leak here is that Shade staking derivatives will be ready from day one. It's already done, already ready to go, which is crazy cool. So like you can add on a staking derivative, and like really cool components of this is like revenue stream from the staking derivative, like goes back to like the Shade DAO, right? Like we always follow this philosophy. Anything that it's introduced in the system feeds the DAO, feeds stakers. So yeah, TLDR, not much you can do out of the gates initially, besides liquidity provide, price discovery, and it is just like speculation at this point, right? The utility isn't there. But then come mainnet launch, which is all goes well, hopefully, you know, 2-3 months later, then the real party starts. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think that's also like fair and, you know, important to bootstrap liquidity, find a price, to have at least this initial stability, also get people on board, share the word, spread the word, make sure everything is also secure, right? Also, people always underestimate the technical stuff behind the scenes.
It's also a 2-part airdrop. So it'll be the first part you'll be able to claim at the airdrop day itself. And there'll actually be a second unlock happens once mainnet's live. So it's kind of like the users that initially come are like rewarded for being there initially. And then we kind of bring people excited. We're going to get them excited again, because then there's this second component waiting for you at mainnet. So there might be users that are like, oh, like we want all the airdrop like right out of the gates, but it's like getting split up specifically to make sure that like you come and use the protocol and you actually like use the app itself and play around with all these phenomenal tools. I'll also say, if we launch Shade and Silk at the same day, because we could have done that, right? Like we could have held off on the Shade airdrop. We could have waited another 3 months, do it all at once. I'll say that the majority of attack vectors that can brutally completely destroy the system are if you launch Shade and Silk on the same day. That's like that we like, the more we looked into it, the more like we need to like, and actually there'll be phases even within Silk and conversion minting, how it comes to market within like a 2-3 day period. Like there's a very specific 6 to 7 step sequencing to make sure that like the attack vectors can't happen. And those attack vectors happen if you just bring everything online. So it's going to require patience from the community, but we put user safety and security and stability of the system above all else. So if people want to be sad and upset about that, like the devs, we're here to protect users. And so like that's we like at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do, right?
True. Yeah, I appreciate that. And what is going to be the primary DEX where the liquidity will be bootstrapped?
Yeah, so right now it's looking like Shade will be on Secret Swap and Sienna Swap, just pending some final components with those teams. It's probably going to be double LP rewards too, if all goes well. So you can earn on Secret Swap, you'll be able to earn CFI and Shade, and on Sienna, if all goes well, you can have Sienna and Shade from those LP rewards too. From there, obviously, like centralized exchange listings, all that fun stuff is always in motion, and those conversations, from what I heard, you know, they start. You want to start those as soon as you can, and it's just about making sure the availability is there, not just for Shade, right? Because like the most important thing is getting the stablecoin in as many places as humanly possible. So
no, I think centralized exchanges are great user on ramp and also great fiat on ramp. Still to date, I think in the future this will change, but still to date that's the main use case. And also a terminal, right? A lot of people, I mean, a lot of these bridges are very, very inefficient, slow, and expensive, and also not secure. So what I do also, that's probably one of the biggest use case I still have for centralized exchanges, is to use it as a terminal to just go from one chain to another. But yeah, I think a lot of people also asked this in the chat, when Osmosis. So you guys are also implement IBC, right?
Yes. So essentially, there is a hard, like an upgrade that has to happen for SNP 20s to be compatible on something like Osmosis. And I can't give that timeline. I might be aware of that timeline, but I can't say that publicly. But we want Silicon Shade on Osmosis, 100%. Osmosis is an absolute beast of a product. So love the liquidity there, love the user interface, love the community on Osmosis. I can't speak higher of the DEX. I think it's futuristic. I know people from TradFi that like were kind of hesitant about DeFi, and I showed them Osmosis, and like now they're liquidity providing, and they're like, this is the future. Like, what the heck? And there are people that like they wouldn't touch DeFi with a 10-foot pole, and then you show them Osmosis, and they're like, this is conceptually insane, and how this plays out, like this is just this is insane. So I can't wait to see Osmosis continue to 10x 100x volume and liquidity. It's such a cool DEX. So
yeah, they just achieved a milestone with $1 billion in liquidity locked, and I think $100 million in 24-hour trading volume, which is all on chain, right? Not like many centralized exchanges that have fake volumes and wash trading and all these things. So I think when Osmosis is the new when Binance, and the Osmo community is super passionate about it. And like I said, I see also a lot of TradFi people or Ethereum users, they are just priced out. It's not fun to be on Uniswap anymore. MetaMask hasn't really evolved, right? And in Cosmos, we have Kepler, and we have free transactions on Osmosis. We have IBC, and now also secret DEXs and Secret Swap and Sienna. So many cool things that are being innovated. Maybe two small things that I wanted to ask before we get into questions, so everybody get ready to ask your questions. Does Shade have an infinite supply, or is it capped? And also, is there any plans that you have for the airdrop, for example? I still think many people are not going to claim it because they're not even aware of it. That you will potentially do something like Osmosis and claw it back into the community treasury, or if you could share some thoughts on these two things.
So we're taking inspiration from Osmosis. We saw how they did the thirdening model, and we're like, that's brilliant. So for staking rewards and liquidity, we're using the 10-year thirdening model. So identical to Osmosis, brilliant stuff. And then same way that they did treasury atrophy, Osmosis, we're literally using the same, like Osmosis is literally our model that we used. So identical atrophy mechanism from people that don't claim it. But that atrophy, I'd have to check with the devs. I believe the atrophy begins from the mainnet launch, not from the start of like the first airdrop. But I have to confirm that. It could be wrong, so don't take my word for it on that. Was there another question? Those
max supply.
Oh, max supply. Yeah. So currently, no, there's no max supply on Shade. Okay. You could hypothetically put in some sort of cap, but then conversion minting would be frozen, and that just means that like the stablecoin couldn't hold its peg. So it's like it's kind of one of those design constraints that at the point that you need a supply cap on Shade when it's already designed to be deflationary, like something probably broke really badly at the point that you wanted a fixed cap on supply. It's the way I would describe it. So
awesome. Let's get into some community questions. I'm just checking here on Twitter. There was a lot of engagement, lots of questions. Richard has one. Richard Bryan is asking whether Shade is kind of like Juno, but for the secret network, and what is the principal function of Shade exactly? I know we covered a lot about these things, but maybe if we can summarize those things, would be really cool.
Sure. So Shade Protocol is built on top of Secret Network. Shade Protocol is not its own standalone layer 1. What it really is, it's an application protocol. It's a set of primitives all working together on top of a layer 1. But it's not like a layer 2 that's its own side chain, right? Like it's literally like directly on the layer 1. So that's the main differentiation. Juno is its own layer 1. It's a phenomenal community. Love how they bootstrapped all that. But that's the very, very differentiated in that sense. Shade, the value of Shade is a couple of things, and it largely has to do with the value accrual mechanism. So there is the Shade staking reward, APR. There is the arbitrage, APR, that's generated from securing the peg. There'll be stabilizer token airdrops. Every time a new synthetic asset is launched, there has to be a stabilizer token that gets launched with it. And Shade stakers are the ones that are going to be receiving those stabilizer token airdrops. And then there's also value accrual from the Silk transactions. So out of the gates, 4 super strong accrual mechanisms. You could also add in Shade staking derivative, revenue capture. So maybe I would call that like 4.5. And every time we launch a new primitive, the value capture for what the floor price of Shade is becomes stronger and stronger. Additionally, with bonds capturing all these uncorrelated assets, we talked about how the layer one, how the treasury is going to be staking those layer one tokens. That functionality already exists. Like it's there. We have the contract. It's on testnet. Treasury can stake secret. So that APR stream from the treasury also will be partially redirected back to stakers. So that really brings us up to like 5.5 from 4.5 to 5.5. And governance token holders ultimately get a say over how the DAO and the treasury assets are used. So you could say that Shade is also a claim on like treasury assets in some capacity. So whatever value you want to attach to governance and the ability to distribute something like a dividend or burn Shade, do buyback, all that stuff with the DAO, that's lovely. So quite a few value accrual mechanisms for Shade, and our goal is to one day have it be like, I hold Shade and I'm receiving 10 to 15 different revenue streams. And that's like traditional finance people, the value of an investment is the present value of future cash flows, right? And there's a lot of tokens out there that like they don't actually have cash flows. They don't even have like necessarily like revenue. So like traditional TradFi people come in and they say like, how do we even evaluate like these things? So one of our goals is to make sure we design a token that fundamentally is generating and receiving value over time, because then you can actually find the floor value for it, and that's like an important thing. Yeah.
Is there also any plans to embed Atom into this whole system?
Absolutely. So the bonds and the entry minting, both of those will allow users to essentially like acquire Shade from the treasury in return for like those Atom assets. Treasury receives the Atom assets, treasury turns around and stakes Atom, right? Like that's like the dream kind of user flow. And
from the staking rewards, Shade stakers would earn.
Exactly. They'd be earning either the treasury. We'll have to decide. I mean, treasury can either like ascend. I think just this. I love the idea of like just the revenue stream from the staking rewards being redirected to the stakers. Like, don't sell the underlying collateral. Just like potentially like redirect the revenue stream and just keep growing. Kind of the DAO in that sense. I think we'll see it. One of the biggest narratives will be like DAOs that do like cross-chain staking, cross-chain liquidity providing. Like we're already starting to see this stuff happen. It's not a new concept, but I think we have the Shade DAO sitting on top of like a very cohesive and well-planned system. So
to me, all that you talked about so far, it sounds a lot like the big innovation here is that we're actually starting to denominate things in cryptocurrencies, in coins, right? Instead of pegging and anchoring everything around a stable $1 value or €1 value, right? We're now entering this truly crypto focused and cryptocurrency centric era, and I think having a basket of underlying assets around it makes so much sense. And like you can do so many cool things because there's so much cash flow in crypto. People don't even know about it. That you can earn staking rewards. They still hold their coins on centralized exchanges and miss out on all the airdrops, miss out on the real staking rewards, transaction fees, swap fees for liquidity provision, all these things. RB is asking how you came up with the name Silk. Is there any story to that?
Oh man, that's just such a beautiful question. Thank you, RB. Seriously, shout out. I'll never forget, there was a period of 2 to 3 weeks. This had to have been in like late April of 2021, where I was like, what is the name of what we're building? And this stablecoin needed to have a name that had global significance, because if Silk isn't held by people from around the world, if I can't go to a coffee shop in Thailand and a coffee shop in Brazil and a coffee shop in the US and not be able to buy something with Silk, then our mission failed, right? Like that is how big this vision is we want Silk, this globally stable payment, to be the future of Web3, right? And so that's where the name Silk came from. It has a couple of shout outs. So first off, it has the shout out to the Silk Road, which is one of the most significant trade routes in human history. So it has significance specifically with like Eastern Hemisphere, Europe, Africa. It's literally like at the crossroads of so much of ancient civilization.
Not the Silk Road.
Well, that's the other shout out though, right? It's the loose shout out is that Silk is somewhat of a shout out to the Silk Road, right? And the Silk Road in terms of privacy, in terms of that whole ethos and movement. But we wanted the name to be, it's Silk as a standalone kind of thing, because silk is it flows, it's beautiful, it's premium. That's like part of the branding, right? So it's shout out to history, it's a shout out to the Silk Road, it's a shout out to the actual asset and commodity in the real world and the historical significance of it. If you look at the Silk logo, I would definitely recommend looking it up sometime. The amount of design and thought that went into it is like super important. It's like this little S shape, and it combines, it's fixed to the outside of the circle, which is like representative of its stability, but then it's also connecting two parties in the middle. And the shape of the S also takes the shape of like a river or a trade route. So even just like looking at Silk, there's just like so much going on there from like a branding standpoint. And we actually had an anonymous marketing retainer work with the Shade core devs. We don't even like know who they are, but they're just like phenomenal. So I think that's kind of a beautiful thing, that we can bring people together from around the world. And I think because Silk's goal is so global, it needed a name that was globally recognized, right? Not some weird acronym. Like it's Silk. So
I got a question also a lot, also on Twitter, people that say, hey, this is so cool. I love also you guys and, you know, Carter and the whole team that is working on these things. What would be your recommendation for people that actually want to get involved more than just being an airdrop recipient and a silent observer? What could they do to get actively part of this?
Yeah, so two things. First off, the Discord, there's a PEG research channel. We have literally people from all over the globe coming up with different back-tested models for the future of Silk. It blows my mind. Like I don't know these people, and like they're literally determining the future of the protocol for whoever can discover the most stable system. And we have like little micro grants out for this. So there's a governance channel. People are talking about like all the different DAO structures, all the different governance structure. How are we going to structure governance? So I would say go to the Shade Discord, from marketing to quote unquote shilling to memes. Like your presence and your energy is what makes Shade Protocol and makes the Silk dream come alive. Every single person matters. If you're a developer, like please just express interest. This is an open, like you can look up Shade Protocol GitHub. Contracts are like open source. Like you can see what's going on there. We want as many developers in on the dream and the vision, and we are seeing more and more developers separate from the core devs that have been hopping in and are going to be building their own things attached to Shade Protocol, their own primitives attached to Shade Protocol. So bring your energy, bring your curiosity, bring your creativity, and like we welcome that, and we will find a home for you. We're doing like micro Shade grants to community contributors, like even before things are fully launched. So like if you're doing crazy good stuff, you're going to be recognized for it. Finally, there's something called the Shade Spartans. I didn't invent this. This is like a community member that like started this movement. And essentially it's a closed channel where if we see like a really high level contributor, they get the Shade Spartan title. They get invited to like the super secret Telegram. And we have like, I think we're 30 plus people that are just like super high level contributors. There's some days I wake up, look at the Shade Spartan chat, and there's like 1,000 messages. And it's like, what the heck? Like these people are like together, we're just like really, really pushing the cusp of what's possible. I also like the Spartan name because Spartan, Silk Road, like historical crossover. It's like, and I didn't invent that. Like a community member, they just went with it, ran with it. And now like the Shade Spartans are like, they're its own standalone community and group. So come contribute. You will be recognized for it. And if not to contribute, like come learn, because I think Silk has a future in Web3, and you get to say you were early and you got to be a part of something beautiful. So
that's awesome, man. No Zeros Ninja is asking whether there will be a Silk USDT or USDC pool out the gate, and where would those be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ultimately, like Silk isn't on mainnet yet, so I think once we get a little closer, we can do a better job of figuring out what LP pools are going to be bootstrapped. But 100%, I'm waiting for the Curve-like product to emerge, either IBC version or Secret Network version. Like we do need as much stablecoin to stablecoin liquidity as possible for end users. So my answer is Silk will go everywhere, right? And with whatever stable that wants to pair with it. We don't have biases on that. Well, we're biased towards decentralized stablecoins, but we're also biased towards liquidity. So it has to be a balance. But yeah, Secret Network is where to live. But also we've talked with like any of the Cosmos chains that want to collaborate, like please message us. Like we're totally open to it. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Polkadot is another ecosystem we've already had conversations with, some potential collaborations there, bringing Silk to Polkadot. Yeah, that's kind of where we stand right now.
Yeah, and I think also as the interoperability between those layer ones and layer zeros improves, there's also going to be more liquidity spread across different chains. Yeah, I think we're almost above the hour mark. Is there any final alpha leak that you can share with us? Something that you've never shared publicly before, that the community would be like, oh my God, did you just say that? You know, something like that. Is there anything that you can drop before I let you go?
I'll just say that there's more teams building on Shade Protocol than you think that aren't the core teams. That's as much as I can say right now. And so if you're a builder, please come, because there's many things to be built. I'll also say thank you for your time. Anyone that took the time, like Cryptocito, like you've been an awesome host, like just very gracious that you invited me on, and just like thank you to the community for showing up in full force. Get plugged into like any Cosmos project. It doesn't matter what it is, like there's a home for you. And like the thing that makes decentralization work is community. I told you this earlier, Cryptocito, on a different call.
Yeah.
There's two things that can't be forked: integrations and community. And so your energy and your passion for any of these projects, that's unforkable. You can't recreate that. So keep being passionate, keep being curious, and thank you for watching. So
that's true. Yeah, the community can't be forked. That's a very important thing to recognize. I think Peter Schiff, if you're watching, you should also understand this, because he keeps saying that, oh, Bitcoin is infinite and there's so many coins. Like, but it's not the same. The community is really what brings the value. The code obviously brings this intrinsic value and the game theory and all these kind of things. And we talked about so much today. I actually have to rewatch this, I think, 1 or 2 times. But the community is then what really, brings value to it. So I appreciate everybody watching. We have consistently almost 150 people throughout the whole stream, which is a lot.
I'll say one last thing too, as like a mission statement. I will not sleep until I can go to a coffee shop and purchase something with Silk. And I just want the community to know that, like, I will work relentlessly, and the devs and everyone in this community, like, until Silk is globally accepted, we do not sleep. Like we push, because what we're doing could change the entire world. And like, we 100% believe that. So sorry. I just wanted to like insert one last thing in there.
I like that. That's commitment. There we go. So what's the final call to action? What's the final thing that people can do now if they say this all sounds cool? I like Carter. I like his passion. I like his mission that he's on. Where should they join? You mentioned the Discord.
Yep.
But what are the Twitter channels to follow, and Telegram, I guess?
Yep. So I would look up Shade Protocol on Twitter. You should be able to look up Shade Protocol. It's got like 21.5K Twitter followers. On there is a link that takes you to, like, in the description of the Twitter profile, that brings you to the Telegram, to the website, Instagram, whatever have you. Like, you name the platform, it's on there. You can also look up shadeprotocol.io. White papers living right there. All the community links live there. Another really good place to go to is if you look up the Secure Secrets YouTube. It's one of the core development teams. I have a bunch of YouTube videos on there where I just like talk about Silk and Shade. And there's like, I talk about the legal landscape. I talk about the branding. I talk about synthetics. I have standalone YouTube episodes. So if you really want to take the deep dive and listen to this guy rant for hours, like there's like a lot of stuff out there. So yeah, welcome to the community. It's a fun ride, and excited to have anyone kind of join the community, join the Shade community.
Yeah, I just dropped all the links here in the chat, and hopefully I don't forget to also add it later to the description in the video. Thanks so much for jumping on. This was really cool and very, very, very educational. I also always love these episodes. Gregory Landour from Region termed this phrase that what I'm doing here is basically public learning. So all I do is just, ask questions and learn from you. So thanks for explaining this, taking the time, and can't wait for Silk to go live and Shade. So really excited for that.
100%. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You too, man. Take care.